Well, thanks to everyone for coming this morning and watching us online to see this event on data centers, which turns out to be a really hot topic, which when we started doing it, we didn't expect, but the title is Bolstering Data Center Growth, Resilience, and Security. And fortuitously, almost by coincidence, NTIA has released a RFC just this morning. So if you haven't seen it, the web link to that will be on our page for the event. We're really glad to do this because this is a part of a larger effort we have here to look at 5G, O-RAN, AI, fiber, software as a service, computing as a service. They're all part of a larger move to build the infrastructure of the economy of the future, right? And it's actually funny, if you look at the map of where the data centers are located, it's the economic growth driver for the United States. One thing that we found that was sort of unexpected, and I'd like to thank In-Q-Tel for holding an event that called this to a lot of people's attention. Remove one piece and the rest slows down. It's like one of those Lego puzzles, right? And it turns out a key piece is data centers, right? Lots of attention recently, which is an interesting sign. I'll say that much of the attention occurred after we decided to do this, so a good topic. The NTIA RFC will be something that I think Alan will talk about. The format today is we'll have 2 keynotes followed by an expert panel. It's a 1-hour event. And with that, let me say, I was trying to think, what should I say to introduce Alan? And that's both polite to former NTIA directors and assistant secretaries, but also accurate. So incredibly successful tenure. The end is in sight, but it's not that close. But remarkable tenure there for Alan, and a great job. With him will be Carla Frisch, the acting executive director and principal deputy director at the Department of Energy's Office of Policy. She's worked extensively on all of these issues. I'm not going to read everyone's full bio because they're immensely long, and we will have them on our website as well. But with that, let me turn it over to Alan.
Thank you, Jim. That is really high praise coming from Jim Lewis, who has a storied career here at the Commerce Department and beyond. And thank you for hosting us. I was just saying beforehand, when it's wonky but very important, we know where to go. So thank you for hosting us again here. And I'm very glad to be able to share the stage with Executive Director Frisch, and so glad we can be working in partnership on these really important issues as we kick off our work together on data center growth. And I'll just say also thank you to the panel. We have a great lineup here, folks, to talk about the big issues around data centers. And let me just start by saying, right, data centers are not new, but the way we're using them is. And even before artificial intelligence supercharged demand, data centers have become a linchpin of our data economy, right? Our digital economy. For decades, popular information services have run on data centers, and the cloud computing revolution, which some of us remember, really coming onto the stage, has created a massive investment over these last decades and a dependence. And today, right, consumers, and whether they realize it or not, rely on data centers for everything from search engines to mapping software to food delivery services. Businesses rely on them too. And I was struck by this statistic when we were putting all of this together, that data centers consumed more than 4% of the country's total electricity in 2022. It's a massive footprint, right, already. So because of this central role that we know that data centers are playing, they are a key area for attention to maintain US competitiveness, our leadership, and national security. This is especially true now that the way we are using data centers is changing. There is no better example of that than the growth and change being driven by artificial intelligence. Right now, there are more than 5,000 data centers in the United States, but demand is projected to grow by over 9% annually through the end of the decade. That is a very high rate of growth for a very big industry already. Much of that demand, we know, is being driven by the growing need to train and maintain a new generation of machine learning systems that are going to have enormous benefits for our economy. So right now, we face enormous challenges in meeting that demand. The Biden-Harris administration is taking a whole-of-government approach to meeting that challenge. The Department of Energy, as we're going to hear, has a host of resources available to help data center developers. I'm sure the executive director will talk more about that. Our colleagues in other agencies like the State Department, our colleagues across the Commerce Department are all doing important work related to data center supply chain risk management, to cybersecurity and broader security issues. And that brings me to our work here today. At NTIA, we're doing our part too. And I'm delighted to announce that today NTIA is kicking off a broad inquiry into how federal policies can support the growth of US data centers. Our request for comment seeks input on a number of issues as we look to achieve data center market growth with sustainability and security. We know, for example, that data centers impose intense demands on power grids, and that demand is going to continue to rise. But the challenges we want to explore go beyond energy. There are supply chain issues related to access to trusted equipment. There's a growing need for a specialized workforce. There are cybersecurity considerations to protect the information stored and processed in data centers. And we have to tackle land availability. With apologies to our guests from Loudoun County, we can't build them all in Northern Virginia. I'm sure we'll hear more about that too. So all of these are the kinds of topics we're looking for input on. We need broad input on all of these challenges and more. Our goal is to use this feedback that we get from this request for comment that we've launched today. Our goal is to inform policy recommendations to foster sustainable, resilient, and secure data center growth. To close, I'll just say we have a big challenge ahead of us, and the stakes are high. Data centers are the backbone today of a secure and resilient digital economy. They are critical to US competition, leadership, and security. And right now, we know we do not have enough data centers in the US to power the coming AI revolution. But together, we can chart a path forward to meet that demand in a sustainable way and to realize the full potential of the AI revolution to the benefit of all. Thank you. I'll just take a minute to introduce our next speaker. Carla Frisch is the Acting Executive Director and Principal Deputy Director of the U.S. Department of Energy, Office of Policy. She has a long career working extensively on energy system vulnerabilities and solutions, a long career at the Department of Energy. I'm thrilled that we're able to work together on this issue. Please join me in welcoming Executive Director Frisch.
Hello. Thank you, Assistant Secretary Davidson, and to Jim Lewis and CSIS for hosting us. This is an exciting topic, and we're really glad that today NTIA is releasing this request for comments. And I'll just say that we at Department of Energy and our sister agencies across the government are going to be looking carefully at those responses that come back to NTIA. We really are looking for input at this moment in time where we're seeing such growth and expansion and opportunity. And you all may know us at Department of Energy for our energy work, but we're also home to extensive and advanced supercomputing and advanced computing work, which goes all the way back to the Manhattan Project of using advanced computers to look at complicated science problems. In the last decade and a half or so, we have built and maintained many people don't know this, the 2 fastest supercomputers in the world, the Department of Energy, and those are public resources. They're available for research, they're available for our national security mission, and companies can come and get time with us on that computing capability. So with that capability, we have AI test beds. We also have, through public-private partnerships, supported key parts of the GPU hardware and software development. We've got a lot of techniques and efficiency, both the computational efficiency and the physical infrastructure, for example, the cooling. We've got new technologies, and the best part is it's public domain, right? Our doors are open to share everything we've learned. Now, as the Assistant Secretary mentioned, this growth in data centers does require growth in electricity, and that's something that we are excited about. That's part of what we've been projecting and predicting at Department of Energy, and we see that as an economic opportunity. If you look, the past decade or so, demand has been flat in the US, electricity demand, and NERC, the North America Electric Reliability Corporation, says, okay, the next 10 years, we're looking at a 15% increase in demand. 15%, that sounds pretty good. But if you go back and look in time, pre-2005, we were regularly seeing 10-year increments of 30% increases of demand. So what we're talking about now feels like a lot because we've been flat, but it's only about half as what we're used to. Now, the source of that demand is different and interesting. Of course, it does come from data centers, and that's what we're here to talk about today. We're also seeing growth in electricity demand from expanded domestic manufacturing. And in a meta twist that includes manufacturing of clean energy technologies, requiring new electricity to produce those clean energy technologies here. And we're seeing, of course, expansion in electric vehicles and other electric technologies. So the good news is we have a set of available, cost-effective technologies that we had, but weren't necessarily as available and cost-effective 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. We've got expansive solar built out this year, record solar build out in the US the last 4 years, each year. Onshore wind, we've got battery storage. I think some of our panelists are using that battery storage. And not only do we have the technologies and their costs available, we have this set of incentives, this incredible set of incentives through the Inflation Reduction Act, through the bipartisan infrastructure law. We have 20 new or expanded tax credits. We're seeing all kinds of uptake of those tax credits. We have grant programs. So many resources, in fact, that people don't know what they all are. So what we have done for you all is we have made a website at Department of Energy, energy.gov/ you guessed it, electricity demand. I'm gonna say it again, energy.gov/ electricity demand. And we have gone through and listed out for our data center operators, builders, for our states and local governments, tribal governments, regulators trying to partner with those companies, every resource we have. So we've got grant opportunities. We have a lot of technical assistance opportunities, including on things like how to design a rate in a way that's gonna work and gonna make sure that we are protecting low-income customers. So a couple of examples of things we've been doing at Department of Energy. We have at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, our Center for Data Center Efficiency, been operating for over 15 years, and they are available to share all the tips about how we have achieved that record efficiency in the US. We have, through our ARPA-E program, which is looking for new technology solutions, a new storage technology, for example, sodium ion technology, and guess who the very first customer was? Data center for grid edge application. We provided a grant through our Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnership Program to the Virginia Department of Energy. And I'm looking at our Loudoun County friends over here, which you'll hear more from later, to have a battery energy storage system at the Iron Mountain Data Center in Virginia. So that battery storage automatically flips this from a problem of what is the data center taking from the grid, so how can the data center actually support the grid? So what we're looking at here is actually a real time of opportunity and expansion. We've got the technologies, we've got the incentives to do so, and we're looking forward to expanding that opportunity and making sure that we can continue to advance the scientific research, the energy research, and the national security research using the AI applications here in the US. So in order to do that well and do that across government, we do need input from all of you on this NTIA request for comment. Thank you.
If I could invite the panelists to come on up on stage, please. Are, I'm going to introduce them mainly by title because, as I said, things are too long. Let me thank Alan and Carla for setting the stage for us. That was really important to realize how the importance of data centers has changed. You used to hear data is the new oil. I used to say that data is the new snake oil. But it turns out data is a crucial resource, and we're going to talk about how you manage it. Let me quickly introduce the panelists. Maureen Russell is Acting Associate Administrator for the Office of Policy Analysis and Development at NTIA. All the issues she works on are the issues we work on here, so thank you for coming. Kevin Reifsteck is a director at Microsoft, an old friend, formerly at the White House, formerly at other agencies. Also someone we pick on a lot, so I apologize to him in advance. Christopher Kimm is Senior Vice President of Global Customer Care and Experience at Equinix. Equinix is one of those companies you probably haven't heard of enough, but turns out to be central to the digital economy, so thanks for coming. And Buddy Rizer from Loudoun County. Loudoun is Mr. Rizer helped build Loudoun County into the data center alley, and if you haven't been there, you should go. But if you have been there, you know what I'm talking about. The largest concentration of data centers in the world. Unfortunately, Abby Sivananthan, from In-Q-Tel, who's an expert on this, and actually helped set it off when In-Q-Tel had an event where people said that Dominion called for a lag of 3 years or more in building new data centers because of the crunch on energy. She's out sick. She tested positive for COVID yesterday. Abby, I hope you feel better, and we'll get you next time. What I've asked the panelists to do is make 5 minutes of opening remarks. Let's be relatively strict on that, and then we'll go into an open discussion. Carl, can we start with you? Did I get the name wrong? Buddy.
Buddy, yes.
Sorry.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me here today. As you might imagine, I speak on data centers quite often. In fact, twice today I'll be speaking on data centers. Data centers for us in Loudoun County have been transformative. Carla talked about opportunity. Well, about 17 years ago, almost 18 years ago, when I arrived at the county, Loudoun County's economy was struggling. We were 81% dependent on residential real estate to fund our county, to pay for our services, pay for our schools, pay for our roads. And of course, we all know what happened around 2007, 2008, the great housing bubble burst. And we lost about a third of the value of our homes. Of course, that meant our tax rate went down, our tax base went down. We were laying people off. We didn't have full-day kindergarten. We couldn't afford half of the things that we would normally do. So it was a challenge. So I was brought in to grow our commercial tax base. I chose to go after data centers proactively. Data centers were already bubbling nationwide, and we had Equinix, and we had AOL, and we had a few others. But I thought we had this opportunity to really grow. As we stand here today, we've been able to lower our tax rate by 42 cents on the dollar, from $1.28.5 to 86.5. Unprecedented reduction in the tax base. This year, we'll get $1 billion in local tax revenue from data centers. It is incredible the way it has changed our economy. We're now about 50% commercial and 50% residential, giving us what U.S. News and World Report said was one of the strongest local economies in the country. So all of that is the good part. Now you have to face some of the challenges that have come with this. When you become the most popular anything in the world, it just keeps moving beyond your wildest expectations, and that's what's happened in Loudoun County. We have gotten to the point where there is a land rush. There will be a deal announced pretty soon where it's going to be $5 million an acre of land that was bought for data centers. You could buy that same land in Loudoun County if it wasn't for data centers for about $1 million. So you're talking about a 5-time multiple because of the demand. So that gives us a lot of challenges. The other challenges that we're facing are around political pushback. We are facing energy, as Carla told you. We have a lot of challenges because with power lines, come a lot of protests, and we're going to need a lot of new power lines in Loudoun County. But what I tell our residents, and you've never seen anyone go from popular, the most popular public servant in the county to the most hated man that like I have in the last few years. But what I tell people is that these are not optional in today's economy. By 2027, about $8.75 trillion of the world economy is going to be dependent on data centers. So we need them. It's just a matter of how we deploy them, where we deploy them. And you mentioned, not all of them can be in Loudoun County. Believe me, we don't want them all in Loudoun County. I work across the country and really across the world helping people find other locations. We think that's a very important thing, especially across Virginia. So on balance, I would tell you, I believe that data centers are the foundation of Loudoun's economy and will be the foundation for the world economy. It's getting to the point, we talked about a lot of the benefits of, but think about health and think about public safety and think about education and think about the people that weren't able to telework during the COVID pandemic because they didn't have the ability to do that. Think about the way we use information. It has become so ingrained in our society that it is time to find that smart path forward for how the industry can continue to grow in a smart way, leveraging new energy technologies and leveraging better relationships inside communities. And that's really what I'm focused on these days.
Thanks, buddy. I think it's for those of you who've been watching Loudoun County over the 2 decades you've been there. When I was a kid, it was a rural county, and now it's one of the hubs of the American economy. So I hope we can talk more about that. Thanks for sticking to schedule too. Kevin.
Thanks so much, Jim, for having me here, and thanks for continuing to pick on me in these events. I appreciate it. I want to build a little bit on what Buddy said, but kind of take a little bit different direction. Wholeheartedly agree that data centers are kind of the future of the economy. And I think a lot of where we've been focused in this discussion so far has been kind of domestically and what do we need to domestically and where the economic opportunities as well as the challenges. When from a Microsoft perspective, data centers are critical to delivering our cloud services, and when those work well, most customers are not thinking about the data centers that are behind that, providing those services. And those cloud services, I think, we increasingly should look at as a form of soft power of the United States. Globally, most countries rely on U.S. technology companies and cloud services to innovate and to power their own economies. And the more they rely on U.S. cloud service providers, the more integrated they're into our economic systems, our technological systems, as well as our value systems as well. And so I think there's an aspect of this discussion that should also look at how do we promote U.S. technology providers to build out data centers and provide cloud services globally as a means of projecting American soft power globally. And if you look at where the competition is coming from internationally in the cloud market to U.S. cloud providers, a lot of those providers might not hold the same value systems that US providers do. So I think if you look back over the last decade of US policy, we've seen particular focuses on 5G and being able to have trusted technology providers in the 5G ecosystem. I think we need to take some of that thinking and apply it in the cloud space as we go forward in the data center space. And so what does that look like? That looks like efforts, which I know CSIS has done in the past, about helping to define what does a trusted cloud service provider look like in an international arena. It might look at how do we encourage or incentivize other governments to help US technology providers build out data centers or increase the consumption of their services within their economy. And those kind of efforts will take a whole of government to promote those things, from the State Department to the Department of Defense to NTIA and Commerce, as well as Department of Energy. The one last point I'll make real quick, I know in the RFC, there's an interest in looking at what are the security requirements or what should be the guidelines for security for data centers to be. From a Microsoft perspective, we believe in reasonable security requirements and that everybody should be thinking about security. Our challenge that we often face is that we currently comply or meet more than 100 certifications or regulatory requirements, either directly or so that our clients can meet them. And so our ask is, as governments think about security requirements, that those are harmonized and aligned internationally and domestically, such that we don't have to continue increasing the number of certifications and regulations that we have to meet, and we can bring some sanity to that.
Great, thanks, Kevin. I used to say that cloud was the least recognized sector of the economy, but after hearing Buddy and others talk about data centers, I now say cloud is the second least recognized sector, and how important it is to what we're actually doing. So we can talk about regulatory harmonization some other time when we have a couple of weeks. But let me turn to Maureen.
Yes. Hi, and thank you everyone who's in the room and those who have joined us online. And thank you CSIS for hosting us today for this really important conversation. As you know, we launched our request for comment on bolstering sustainable, resilient data center growth in the United States. Now, who is NTIA? That might be a question that a lot of folks might have right now, but the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, we're best known for being the President's principal advisor on telecommunications and information policy. You know, we're a small but mighty institution housed in the Department of Commerce, where we have the fortunate ability to look at private sector issues. We look at regulations. We can discuss emerging tech policies. We can talk about spectrum. You know, just this last year, we've released thick, deep reports, policy recommendations too, on AI accountability measures, on open model weights, on kids' online health and safety. We've even helped with the White House's recent launch of their roadmap for internet routing security. We can talk about something from the 1980s, and we can talk about something that's going to happen in 10 years. So we're really fortunate to sit in that position and have these larger and much important forward-looking conversations that allow us to talk about cybersecurity, data security, workforce development. We can talk about broadband development, and we're very excited for this request for comment because it really does bring all of those levels of expertise together for us. And we're very excited to hear from the American public about what they're seeing as the important aspects of this conversation. We also attended the In-Q-Tel event last year, or earlier this year, and heard the conversations from the analysts regarding what state regulations or state policies that were moving forward that might limit the growth of data centers, that might prevent, the further implementation of fast broadband internet for the United States, our economic growth or our innovation. So we came back to our headquarters downtown DC, and we really started throwing Post-it notes on a wall. What can we do about this? And we realized that these conversations were happening in every part of NTIA. So that was an exciting moment. to have a very bureaucratic product come out. And we're very excited about this conversation today, and I don't want to keep us from getting there. So thank you again. Please comment on our request for comment. It'll be up for 60 days, and we look forward to the report that will eventually come from this effort. So thank you again.
Thank you. And our final speaker is Christopher Kimm, Senior Vice President of Global Customer Care and Experience. The part that leapt out of his bio for me, so I'm going to read it, is you started at UUNet. How many people in the room know what UUNet was? We got a tiny handful, but that's really impressive. So that makes you a pioneer, whether you like it or not.
I guess. I was thinking, buddy, I've been working with my work life centered in Loudoun County for 25 years. So I've been at this for a while. Yeah, and another piece of my bio just worth mentioning is I'm also part of the Data Center Coalition. I'm a member of the board of directors there. I'm in fact chair of the board of directors, and that's a trade association of owner-operators of data centers. We have 31 members. They include public companies like Digital Realty and Equinix, but also the very largest technology companies like Microsoft and Meta and Google and AWS, but also a very large number of private equity funded data center companies that have formed in recent years. And so I bring that perspective to this as well. We really appreciate the chance to participate in this discussion. I think I was delighted to hear the keynote setups of the issues and opportunities in the space. I think that the opportunities, if we want to develop data centers to be the national economic and security resource that we think they should be, then the primary issue is power. It is absolutely between us and the successful execution of a strategy to deliver more high-performance computing and more AI into the economy and into our environment. I want to tell you a quick story about who Equinix is, because there are data center companies and there's data center companies. Equinix is what we call the co-location provider. We have many customers. You might find 200 or 300 customers in one of our data centers, each subdivided into small spaces. We come out of the history, it was actually related to the work I did at UUNet. UUNet was a commercial internet service provider, the first, when we were looking to hand traffic to other internet service providers. It was critical to the delivery of the service. Your email or your web page needed a route. And peering, the ability of internet service providers to connect to each other, became massively constrained in the 1990s, in the mid-1990s. Equinix was formed in 1998 to offer a solution to private peering. It was neutral ground. The name comes from equality, neutrality, and internet connection. And that business has grown up into something even more. We used to invite people to come and install their network services gear, their internet gear, in their own space in the data center that they controlled, and they had control of the environment. But if they wanted to interconnect to any of the other providers in that building, we could run a fiber optic cable from cage to cage in hours. And when I was at UUNet in the late 1990s, and we were ordering the first 155 megabit connections, then huge, to connect between internet service providers, those circuits were taking a year to deploy. And they were going to strangle the industry's ability to grow. And so UUNet emerged as this terrific solution, or I'm sorry, Equinix emerged as this terrific solution to being able to go faster. Well, that business grew into the ability to interconnect anybody with anybody. The financial services industry said, hey, we have this trading application that we'd like to deploy where we're no longer going to yell at each other across counters. We're going to do this as computer-based trading. Can we find neutral ground in data centers to do that work? Yes, and they're quite at home inside of Equinix infrastructure. But that's gone on to entertainment and content distribution, the streaming we do, the myriad of ways that we all consume the digital economy. And so today, people come to Equinix to deploy their critical digital infrastructure that is going to power their organization's mission, whatever the organization. It could be an NGO, it could be a government agency, it could be a for-profit company. They may be trying to just build simple infrastructure to allow extranet communication between their remote employees, their business partners. They want to share cloud workloads between Microsoft and Google or AWS. But that infrastructure is absolutely critical to the efficiency and effectiveness of that organization. And so I just simply point out that the digital infrastructure is this enormous economic enabler. And it not only has tax benefits, but jobs. There's now 86,000 as of 2022 direct employees of data centers just in Virginia. It is investment, more than $37 billion of investment by data centers in the last 2 years. And that doesn't even include one of the hyperscalers' commitments in that space. And we're talking about, a future where the economic vibrancy of many communities could be enhanced by the successful deployment of data centers. And so I turn back to power only to say, because I'm sure we'll discuss it more, that the existing system seems to have forgotten a history of 30% growth. And sometimes our load forecasts are unwelcome with our utility partners. And they see it as a burden to engage in a growth of the infrastructure for the future. And then we have objectors who don't want to see additional transmission, either to link new generation, sustainable generation, or to link to point delivery, substations that feed large-scale users like data centers, but also manufacturing. And so when we fix this problem and we scale the utility infrastructure to deliver abundant, affordable, sustainable power, we actually create an economic juggernaut that doesn't only power data centers. Yes, it will benefit my industry, but it will benefit the entire economy of the United States and give us the opportunity to build the kinds of national security infrastructure we'd like to have remain in the United States.
And we'll probably do a follow-on event some months from now, specifically on electricity and power, because when we were doing some of the prep work for this yesterday, it kept coming up over and over again. So stay tuned. But we now have time for a few questions. Let me tell you what they're going to take in general form, market considerations, federal action, and how far we can go with things like today's grid. I'm going to turn it over to each of the panelists to comment. I will ask some question and they'll answer. This is a stream of consciousness moment for them. But if I could ask you to hold your remarks to under 5 minutes. And I know, Buddy, you have to leave at around 11, so if you have to stand up and run out, that's fine with me. Thank you. With that, let me start with that first question. What are the market considerations for data centers that are shaping what we're seeing today? What is it? Power? Is it real estate? Is it NIMBY? There's a lot of good topics here, but how does the market interact with this? You want to go first?
Sure. It used to be, it's evolving, it's ever evolving. The industry as we know it today, and data center's been around a long time, but the industry as we know it today is 20 years old or whatever, not even probably. And it used to be, there were very specific things. I used to walk around with a paper map that said, where the gas lines were. Nobody wanted to be near a gas line. Nobody wanted to be underneath the airport runways. Now you pay a premium to be on a gas line, which is interesting. Things have changed to the point where the number one driver of location is power. It probably number one, number two, number three. It used to be location, location, location. Now it's power, power, power. Because the ability to get power to these facilities is incredibly limited right now. And that's not just a Loudoun County problem. That's not just a Virginia problem. That is a problem anywhere, worldwide right now. So that is the number one driver. Connectivity is also going to be very important. Workforce is going to be very important. We have proactively worked to build a workforce through our community college and through other training systems to get there. Time to market is incredibly important for our companies because they have demand that they have to meet. But if you were going to pick one thing today, you have to start with power when you're having these conversations. And, I don't know if I'm glad Carla left, but maybe she won't look at me. But our grid is nowhere near in any shape to handle the demand currently, much less in the future. We talk about infrastructure in the United States, and we talk about, the poor condition of bridges and water systems and all these things. The grid is just as bad, if not worse. So it is just not to the point where we can continue to do this, especially with the goals of renewable energy that I know all of us have. There's got to be these major investments, and it's going to take a lot of time. As you said, Dominion is now saying 4 to 7 years for anything that's not already in the executable phase, whatever that is. So there's a lot of work to do to try to get ready to be ready for this industry.
And we're going to come back to the question of the grid, but let me see if Kevin or anyone else.
Yeah, I think he covered everything. I did want to kind of re-emphasize from a Microsoft perspective the importance of sustainable energy. Microsoft has, very strong goals in terms of using sustainable energy to power our data centers as well as other things. And so in addition to getting that power, making sure it's sustainable is a huge consideration for us. One other consideration just that he didn't mention from a Microsoft perspective and thinking about hyperscale cloud in particular, building data centers that are geolocated in ways that provide greater resilience is hugely important. And so there's a lot of thinking around ensuring that locations are on different parts of the grid, that they're not in certain regions aren't going to potentially be affected by the same natural disasters. So there's considerations that we often have when thinking about data center locations to ensure that there's resilience between data centers. So that's an additional one I thought of.
Go ahead, Maureen.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we, since 2021, have seen the growth and federal government supporting and funding accessible broadband internet for Americans, right? So you're seeing an opportunity here to build data centers, not just on the coasts, but towards the areas that will see the largest connectivity growth in the United States. So we no longer have to look at just certain states, but we have to look at the entire country. And as we look towards further internet connectivity in places in, say, Montana, New Mexico, Michigan, Indiana, Florida, that we're going to need data centers there too. We also have seen further investment from the federal government, and I know there's a federal government question coming, so I won't use it all here, but in Open RAN, in 5G wireless technologies, which will also require more data to be stored or transited in our country. So I think that's where I see that there's federal funding, which is changing the market. I think there are states that are investing in this themselves and looking at these plans going forward, which is probably the first time in a long time that some states have looked at their infrastructure, whether it's power, water, gas, what have you, internet. So this is a great moment, a huge opportunity for further investment, but also an opportunity to do it mindfully or deliberate and working together and having this information sharing. So I think those are the elements that, responding to my esteemed panelists here. But I also have to say that we are also looking at where our vulnerabilities are in national security and cybersecurity. And that can also drive this market growth in the United States as well. So, some of my work at NTIA is looking at foreign investment and FCC licenses, looking at the last 6 submarine cable applications that have come through. It's all hyperscalers who are building them and operating them, and then a series of 16 fiber pair landing in other countries with data centers, part of that infrastructure too. So is there an opportunity for non-hyperscalers to invest in a data center? Is there an opportunity for, as chips get more powerful and technology gets smaller, what can local governments do with the larger data campus? Is there an opportunity for community colleges to move in? Is there a transition where everyone can get the data storage and analysis they need at the prices they can afford?
If you look at a map of the U.S. and the concentration of data centers, it's kind of a U shape. It starts in Chicago, goes over to the coast, comes down through Virginia, over through the Sun Belt, and then up through California. What's noticeable in that is that the middle of the country is missing, with the exception of Denver. So my conclusion is we need to send Buddy to Kansas.
Yeah, I guess I
You'll like
mentioned
it.
Phoenix, Ohio.
Yeah.
We've seen more development.
Yeah.
I think probably, to Buddy's point, the hunt for land that can be powered with sustainable energy options in a reasonable period of time will do more to distribute data centers around the country than probably any other force. There may be a natural economic force that will be working in concert with this desire. I also think there's interesting technology innovation like edge data centers that can do things like share waste heat for applications in communities, that you could see new kinds of architectures emerge in the future. Those might not be the primary high-performance compute AI deployment places, but they might. There could be some interesting new activity in that space as well. So I think there's a lot going. I'd add to the list of requirements fiber, which is, particularly in our business, our customers are only there to connect to each other. And so the availability of fiber optic infrastructure is expensive to tunnel and build. And so its presence is second on our list after power as we're searching for sites and locations.
We've got about 12 minutes left, and I'm torn because I have two really good questions, and I'm not quite sure which one to start with, but maybe since it's come up a few times, I'll ask. One of the questions we got from people who couldn't be here today is, how far can we go with today's infrastructure? How far can we go with today's grid? What do we need to change? Are there software solutions? Can we re-architect? But have we reached the limit of growth, or what do we need to do to change that?
Well, I think there's a few things. We know that, the grid will get there, right? There's too much at stake not to get there. So we're going to see the grid evolve. We're going to see the grid. But, I think we're going to also see microgrids. I think we're going to see the industry control more of their own energy needs. You've seen where Equinix is already partnering with a nuclear plant, Amazon the same. We see people using green hydrogen in Loudoun County. We have a data center campus that is being powered by gas right now. So I think you're going to see that the growth of the grid, but probably not at the pace that the industry is going to need to keep up. But other solutions will have to start sneaking into that mix, and we'll continue to see the evolution of all of that as part of the solution.
Can I jump the queue and ask Christopher, tell us a little bit about the nuclear side, because this was not what I was expecting when I was trolling for questions.
Yeah, so, the fact is, I think in the industry, we're interested in carbon-free power and have been for some time. We, like Microsoft, have a 2030 commitment for carbon neutrality. We already deliver 100% of our power sourced in North America using sustainable power. But what we see in the future as the continued demand grows, as opposition to transmission becomes an issue in the timely delivery of capacity to different places in the world, that on-site generation, like Buddy mentioned, we've used natural gas-powered fuel cells that could run on hydrogen in many locations. We recently signed an agreement with Oklo, who is an emerging leading manufacturer of small modular nuclear reactors. These are the so-called Type 4 nuclear reactors. They mostly use liquid metal as a cooling strategy. They are walk-away safe in the language of some of the industry partners, in that if you had a power failure to such a reactor, you wouldn't have a meltdown, you'd have a shutdown that would be more graceful. And so, these offer a modular solution to generate energy in places that, historically would have been impossible to get that kind of power density deployed without using fossil fuels. And so it in our minds is in the all of the above strategy of all the possible ways you could provide power to a location. My belief is that in the near term, we'll see the first SMRs deployed in secure nuclear facilities, maybe on the sites in places like Virginia at the North Anna nuclear power plant, which was originally sited for additional reactors, but not all of which were built, that could accommodate, the first versions of this. But while there's great enthusiasm with policymakers and the federal government on SMRs, we saw overwhelming congressional support in support of SMRs in different pieces of legislation. I don't think the general public has been taken along on the ride yet. And if you were to suggest that you were going to install just a small nuclear reactor around the corner from somebody's elementary school, there would be a number of questions that would arise in the local planning commission. And so I think we have work to do to help people understand what the opportunity is and the value, but in a coherent, planned future, you're looking at what are all the things a data center can contribute. It's employment, it's economic value, it's waste heat that can be reapplied in all sorts of applications. Every municipality that pays to heat an indoor swimming pool, take note. So it's driving new deployments of small edge data centers. They're just simply looking for pools and seeing if you can carve out the space near the pool, because it becomes a compelling business proposition. So I think it's a fascinating space. And so we paid $25 million as a reservation fee to Oklo to reserve the ability to buy up to 500 megawatts of power. That was what was reported in the press from them in a power purchase agreement, which is a common structure used to help would-be investors buy into new sustainable generation. You get a PPA, someone makes a commitment, I'll buy the power, that signals to investors, this one's got a green light, that project gets built, and then you can take that sustainable power from that project to harness.
Nuclear power was one of the lost opportunities for the economy, and reasonable public concerns, a bit inflated after 3 Mile Island. What I always think, of course, is the Navy has been operating small nuclear reactors safely for decades, and so there's a model there of what direction we might want to think about at least. And the SMR reactors are actually safer than the ones on the subs and the ships.
Yeah.
So,
And just a fun fact, data centers are full of former Navy nuclear engineers. We love them. It turns out they're really careful. Something about living on a boat with your nuclear reactor makes you diligent. And they're well-trained and exceptional employees, and they make up an important part of our work.
well, I'm glad we got to put in a plug for the Navy, but
Good program.
let's turn to the final topic, if we can, which is federal action. What does the government need to do? And Maureen, I know that's part of the intent of the RFC, but maybe you could kick us off there. What would you want the government to do?
Well, I mean, personally speaking, no, I'm kidding. But I think what we want to see from NTIA is a whole of government response. That's why we're so excited and fortunate that our colleagues at the Department of Energy joined us in this RFC, that they're going to be able to utilize these comments and inform their own policymaking, collaborate with us on what makes the most sense here. And they are the experts on the power side. And I look forward to how these comments are to inform their work. I think on the other more telecom or information policy side, I think we, as a federal government, haven't entertained data centers holistically since the Obama administration and the push from having the federal government own data centers to utilizing the cloud. So I think since then, there have been cybersecurity policy updates, and as well as concerns and vulnerabilities that have been made known. I think there needs to be an effort there to look at harmonizing the cybersecurity standards and policies that we would like to see. I think that there's an opportunity for the government to interject funding or prioritization of certain types of data centers for certain types of federal funded research, looking at the national labs, which again, a lot of them are owned by our friends at the Department of Energy, but also looking at what the Defense Department needs with regards to data centers and what kind of security, whether physical or cyber or data, what have you, is required there. How does this all work with the GSA's FedRAMP program? How do we make sure that the government's doing the best it can with data centers and vendors? But I also, we've learned so much from the broadband program, the Internet for All program, about looking at changing an infrastructure by looking at changing norms too. So our BEAD NOFO, talking about making sure these are careers that are developed, not just one-off construction jobs, but someone can work at a data center for 15, 20 years. Look at career transition for those who have been out of work since COVID. Look at what kind of education is needed, whether it's a certification, a professional certification, or a community college associate's degree, or a 4-year degree or more. We really need to look at it, from appetizer to dessert here. So that's what we hope come from these comments, is that we can identify some stronger policy recommendations based on those key norms, and our lessons learned from all of our other really thorough work in emerging technology, as well as building internet infrastructure.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Kevin, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that was really good. I think the one thing that I think we all identified is the challenge of energy, and talking about the small, the SMRs, the opportunity that government has to kind of lead by example, to help, potentially deploy prototypes or provide runway to do some of these innovative things quicker than maybe industry can do on its own. So that's the one opportunity I'll highlight, looking at the core challenge that I think we all identified.
Well, we've almost come to the end of our time. I'm going to ask Christopher and Buddy if they want to add anything. I noticed that no one used the word preemption, which is always something I think about. It's a scary word. But Christopher, Buddy, any final remarks on federal action?
Yeah, I think, as I pointed out, I feel like the existing system for grid operators, utilities, the generators of new sustainable electricity, the system is Byzantine. It is complex. It requires years of planning to execute clearly needed projects. And so I'm thrilled to hear a whole of government approach to taking on some of the issues in this space. I think the first is you can't go fast enough. That the opportunity is great, but it is not assured that the workloads and the investments will remain in the United States if they cannot be fulfilled. The people who are involved in these kinds of investment decisions will seek other markets to make them work. So there's a huge opportunity, but there's a little bit of threat in this too. And so I see, almost certainly, congressional action needed to simplify the regime, to better interconnect the grids, and to build a system that allows for a much quicker deployment. And it's a public policy challenge, because people didn't know when they purchased their home that there might be a transmission line that would run through the space, because they weren't planned. So how are we going to adjudicate where we put transmission, and how we're going to do it, and how we're going to move quickly in a way that has fairness and equity in it? It's going to require a political solution. So I think we've got fantastic opportunities, but yeah, we need the federal involvement in a serious way.
And I would say invest, enable, and expedite. If they can invest in the grid, if they can enable innovation and not stand in the way of innovation, and if they can, to Chris's point, expedite the process to get these new technologies accepted and implemented, I think that, boy, that would be a report card that I would like to see.
Well, as I said, we're going to have more events on this, because it turns out it's a hot topic. We didn't even touch on things like, we touched on but did not go in depth on things like workforce and climate. So we will have more. Join me in thanking the panelists for an excellent session.